Yeah, this is the first of two videos. I want to show you how to make some doors. And doors by themselves are very useful, but what I'm really showing you with this, especially this video, is how to create a trigger box that actually makes some functionality in your game. Right now, we're going to have a door open when we walk up close to it, but you could play a cutscene, you could trigger some music, you could teleport the character somewhere, you could do anytime you want the character to kind of like be roughly in a particular spot, and then something happens. The trigger boxes are super useful for that. So I'm just going to show you what this is going to do. I'm going to play from here, and I'm going to walk up to this door. It's going to slide over to the side. I'm going to walk through the door, and it's going to shut behind me there. So that's basically keep on doing it over and over again. Looks great. So I'm going to escape out of that, and let's actually go ahead and make this door. So I'm going to come down here into the content drawer. Mine's already open. I'm just going to scroll down to a blank spot in my blueprints folder. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add a blueprint class. And I'm just going to go ahead and select the actor class out of this list, and then we'll give it a name. We'll call this new slide door. Okay, so new slide door. Now I'm going to double click on this blueprint class icon here, and that's going to open up the blueprint. So I'm going to take this and dock this. I'm going to grab the tab up here and just dock it up here at the top here, just so that we can jump back and forth between the blueprint and the map pretty easily. So with this, we're in the new slide door. Remember, there are three areas in our blueprint, and we're going to use two of them. Right now, the viewport, which is where we're at now, is where you put stuff that's physically in the level. So the mesh that we're going to use to make the door and the trigger box will be inside this area. We're not going to do anything in the construction script. That's basically for things that are added to your scene before play begins. But what we are going to do is work on this event graph here. This is where we're going to put some very simple code that's very useful. And once you know how to do this, you can trigger all kinds of things. You can make a light turn on, you can make a bridge lower, whatever, anything you want. It's very useful. So let's go back to our viewport. In this case, we're going to add some mesh to our scene. I'm going to control and spacebar to open up the static mesh folder here of our assets. Remember, you can get access to the content drawer even inside of other viewports like this. I'm going to go ahead and add my Unreal door into the scene. I'm going to add the Unreal door jam. Now, while we're at it, just really quickly, I'm going to deviate for a moment. I'm going to double click on this icon. Remember, this is in the actual content manager, not in the blueprint. You can do this anywhere. I just happen to be right here. I'm going to double click on this, and it's going to take me to this little editor space here. Now, what I have done already is removed the collision. You can see it's grayed out there from that list. So collision, I've removed the collision because I'm assuming that this door jam will be inset into a door, right? Right now, our player will be able to walk right through this if it's just floating around in space, but that's okay because I assume this is going to be in a wall, right? If you didn't remove that collision, then there's going to be an invisible force field here. You're not going to be able to walk through this door. If you just import it from Blender or whatever, it's going to import a default box collision around it, which is going to make you not be able to walk through the door when the door is open. And so that can be frustrating. So the way you fix that is just to remove the collision. Also, if you don't have access to these because you're not in my class, then you want to follow along using stuff in the starter content. Those, I think, is some doors in there that don't have collisions in them at all. So you'll be able to walk right. Everything will work, but you'll be able to walk through it. So you can add collisions up here, add simple box collision that just kind of, again, shrink wraps the object with a simple collision. So that's something to be aware of. We don't really need to worry about that with these assets because they're already set and ready to go. But if you're using different assets, and that might be a frustrating thing. Okay, so we need to add one more thing. Zoom up into the air here. And I'm going to do something intentionally wrong here. I'm going to have my Unreal door selected there, which is something you might very reasonably do. So I've got my door selected, and I'm going to come over here and add. I'm going to search for box on here. Whoops. Box, and then we're just going to add a box collision. So great. All right. Now what I've done over here is I've added this little orange cube here, which we're going to make bigger. But I've done this intentionally wrong because you can see what's going on here. If I grab my door, and remember we want our door to slide to the side over here, well, look what's happening with that box collision. It's going with it. And that can be very problematic because, especially with a collision, because if you're standing here as the player character, it's going to trigger the door to open, but then the collision is going to move off to the side until suddenly the player is no longer standing in the box collision, which is going to say, oh, players left the box. Now we got to shut the door. Oh, in the box, shut the open, and you're going to be in this infinite loop of the door opening and closing on you here. So all you need to do to unparent this is just click on this, left click on this, and just drag it up on top of the Unreal door or any of the other ones. And you can see that's broken them all, so nobody's parented. The box is up here at the top of the list alphabetically now, but there it is. But you know what? Let's just go and parent the door to the door jamb. That way, wherever the door jamb moves, the door will move with it. That's actually a handy thing to do. So, but we don't want that box to be parented to it. That will cause us problems. I'm going to go ahead and hit the R key to get our little scale. I'm just going to scale it up a little bit on a couple of these various axes, and I'll grab the green axis here. And again, I'm W to pull this up in the air. Oops, come on, pull that up. And I think I just kind of looking at it ahead of time, the 3, I just typed in 3, and I think it was 6 and 4 ended up being roughly, again, you can just eyeball it. You don't have to do exactly. I'm just going to pull it up in the air. That looks about right. Now remember, if you ever want to reset any of these, you can just click on this little button over here, and that will set them all back to the previous value on there, or you can just undo a bunch of times. Now be aware too that this is going through the door, right? And that's good in this case because we want the player character to be able to go through the door and then have the door shut behind them, or we want the player character to open the door from the other direction. This is good, right? If you wanted it to be a one-way door, you could just simply do that. If I just don't have the collision box on the side of the door where you want it to be locked from, basically, just that alone, just physically where you position this collision box can actually make different results in your game. But that's good. That's all we need to add in here. So we've got the box collision, the door, and the door jamb. I'm going to hit compile to be tidy, and then I'm going to come over here to the event graph. I'm just going to grab all these and deselect or delete those because we don't need those. Well, the first thing we're going to do here is select the box because we actually want the code to be driven by entering into this box collision. There's a couple of different ways to add this first node here. By far the easiest, in my opinion, is just to simply right click up over here, and you can see add event is right there. And we want add on component begin overlap, second one down from the top. So you can just add it there. You see it's already referencing the box. That's kind of great. And you can just come in here and search for that on a component begin overlap. The other thing that you can do is if you scroll way down over here, all of the options are down here as well. In fact, I'm going to add on component end overlap because we'll use that a little bit later on there as well. You'll also notice now that those two, you can only have one of these per bits of code here. So they've been moved down here to existing events. It's kind of taken it out of your little library and it's put them down over here at the bottom. Okay, great. So starting with this, what this is doing is saying when something enters that collision box, do something. Well, how do we check for what the thing is that went into this box? So we're going to add a cast to. A cast is just a simple computer science way of saying like go talk to other bits of code. It's more complicated than that, but that's a good enough definition for now. So I'm going to right click on here. I'm going to search for cast to BP. I'm just typing that all in little one word, and you'll see that cast to BP first person character comes up at the top of the list. That's the one that I want. Now it's going to be different if you're using third person, and it'll say cast to BP third person in there. If you're using an older Unreal 4 version or whatever, it doesn't necessarily say BP. There's a lot of different things that can appear in here, but this is what we're looking for. I also want to draw your attention to this little checkbox. If you deselect context sensitive, sometimes that can really make a difference in terms of what appears in this. You're typing in the name of the node. I'm typing the exact name of the node. Why is it not showing up? Sometimes context sensitive can get in your way. You can also have that if you're pulling off of a noodle, a wire from an execute pin or whatever. Sometimes if you have something already attached to this little search box, it's better to like do it floating in space like I've done. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can just get different results sometimes. There's so many nodes, there's so many bits of code. Sometimes it just takes a while to find the exact right one. But this is what we want. Cast to blueprint first person character. So I do want to connect those execute nodes. And we have one more thing we need to do with this. Basically, what we're saying is something's walked into the box. Go check to see if the thing that walked in the box was the first person character. But we're not actually kind of reporting back to it here. So what we need to do is grab this other actor pin and plug that into the object. So that other actor going into the object is basically saying something has touched this box here. What is it? Oh, it's a first person character. Great. So when these two are connected, it now lets us execute new code once the player character walks into this collision box. Hopefully that makes sense. So what do we want to have happen now? Just sort of think about it. Like what we want, now we've said, all right, somebody's walking into the box, do something now. What's the thing that we want to have happen? Well, we want the door to open. We want the door to slide open to the right. and we want it to go over a certain amount of time. So the best way to do that, I can't actually pull off this execute pin, and I'm going to search for time. And I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom. It always ends up being in the very bottom for some reason. Add timeline. That's what we want. So I'm going to add a timeline. And a timeline is basically a little kind of miniature animation node that you can add to pretty much any code here. I'm going to call this move door. It doesn't really matter what you name it. This is kind of for your internal use, but this node is now called move door. So in order to get into this, I'm going to double click onto the node, and now I'm inside the move door node. I can go right back to my event graph, and I can go right back to being inside that timeline. So that's how you edit that. So what we want to do is add a track. I'm going to click on this little button here to add a track. Normally we're adding a flow track. By far you want, like, I want a number between 1 and 1,000. I want a number between, negative 0.2 and negative 0.3, whatever. You're adding numbers to this. But in this case, we physically want to just move the mesh, right? It's a pretty straightforward thing we want to do. So we're going to add a vector track, because moving the mesh is going to be about its position, right? X, Y, Z, 3 vectors, right? So we want this vector track in here. And you can see, oh look, X, Y, and Z. So that makes a lot of sense. Let's give this a name here. We'll just call this move. Again, you can call it Shirley, it doesn't matter. This is just the name of the pin that's going to come out of the other end of the timeline. But let's go back to our viewport and see what exactly is it we want to have happen. So I'm going to click on the viewport tab up over here, and I'm going to go back to my door, and I want our door to slide over to the right. So I'm just going to navigate over here to where I can see it and then say, all right, so I'm going to grab the red arrow here, because remember, X is red, right? We want to move it over here. So I'm going to grab this and slide it over until it's kind of hidden in the door jamb over there. And that looks at, no, it's about 170. Let me just round that out. I'm going to type in 17, enter there. And yep, that's got it hidden in the wall, basically. You actually might, maybe it might make more sense to have it like not completely hidden, because like, why does it disappear into the door jamb? I don't know, maybe that's a little bit better, but we'll just go with 170 for now because it's a nice easy number. So we're moving it positive, right? We could have it actually go in the other direction if we want. We could have it go this way, and then now it's negative whatever, right? But we want this to be positive 170. I'm just going to click the reset value button just to get it all back to 0, because I actually don't want it to be moving in strange ways. I just needed that number, positive 170. So back to the move door timeline over here, click on that tab. I'm going to go ahead and lock the Y and the Z, because we're not moving up or down or forward or backwards here. We're only moving to the side. So just clicking on that little lock there will just stop any accidental movement going in other directions. I'm going to right click on the timeline and add a key to this. So I've right clicked on that red line there, and I'm going to add a key to X. And I've got time, I'm close to 0, but not quite. So I'm going to click in this little 0 field over here, and I'm going to type in 0, and I need to hit enter here. You actually need to hit enter or return, or else it'll default back to what it was before. So just remember that enter or return every time you type into one of these little fields. Also, I've noticed too, something else I've forgotten to do is the length of it. 5 seconds is a long time. The sound effect is about 2 seconds long that we're going to add in later on. I think this wants to be about 2 seconds. That seems to be a good amount of time. So I'm going to type in 2 for the length and then enter. So you can think like length is like the length of time, because this is a timeline. So this is really pretty much seconds. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but it almost always is seconds, right? So at the start of this timeline, I don't want the door to suddenly jump to a different position, right? I want it to be where it is when we walk up to the door. So it's in the 0 position where it is in the viewport, right? Nothing's going to change at the beginning of this timeline. If I made this 10 or whatever, the door would suddenly jump 10 centimeters or whatever. So that we don't want that. I'm going to hold down the shift button here and click on the other end of that. I can right click and say add a key, or shift click. They do the exact same thing. But with this button selected, with this node selected, I'm going to click over here on the time and type in 2 and enter or return. And now the value, what's the value that I need to put in here? Positive 170, right? So 170 is how far I want it to move on the X over 2 seconds. If that makes sense. So I'm going to return there. Good, except, oh wait, where did my timeline go? Well, if you look at the scale that we start at here, it's like 0 to 0.5, and we just made it 170. So it's like way up in the air. You can see that it's still there. It's just going straight up in the air. The way to fix that is just come over here and say zoom to fit vertical there, and now we can see it's going from 0 to 2. That's nice. Just so you know you can do it, doesn't make any difference at all right now. I'm just going to select both of these nodes, and I'm going to right click on one of them, and I'm just going to set this to auto on here, and that's just going to give us a nice little kind of fading in and out timeline thing. You can change these handles. You can make it steeper or longer or whatever. You can make it something open and close by making a V and giving it 3 pins and say, all right, I want this door to quickly open and then quickly close again. So the shape of these lines, you can just sort of think of this graph as like, you know, a time over distance, right? So it's kind of like the longer this graph, the slower it's going to be. The changes in the values. Hopefully that all makes sense. So we're all good. We can just jump back to our event graph over here. And now we've got move door with our move output on here. So what is it we want to move? We want to be moving the door. So I've got that selected, the door mesh. And then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to right click and search for set rel is all I really need to do here. Set rel, and I'm looking for set relative location. So we want it to be from where it is right now, move it 170 in the X, right? So that's set relative location, and you can see it's got the Unreal door already referenced in it because we have it selected in the components up there. So set relative location, boom, there we go. And you can see there's that reference. Now, if you forget to have it selected, I'm just going to delete that just so you can see how easy this is to grab a reference. You just come up to the thing you want to reference, click on it and drag, and then you could just drop it onto the graph and wire it up yourself, or you can drop it right onto your target there, which is where it wants to go. And then when you release it, it automatically plugs it in for you. So that's nice. So here's our setting the relative location of our door. So I'm now going to put the execute pin in. So every time, every tick, it's going to update a little bit and it's going to be moving it to its new location. So we're going to take the move, and because this was a 3 vector that we added and it's looking for a 3 vector, they're both yellow, they're both happy, plugs in, it's perfect, great. So this is all we need. I'm going to go ahead and compile over here. This is only going to open the door very simply, but we can check and make sure that we're on the right track. So new sliding door, I'm going to drop this in next to our door, and I'm going to come in here and play from here, and let's see how the door works. If I walk up to the door is sliding over. Oh, and I think it's maybe just sliding to the left in this case because it's probably the door, the blueprint is backwards. So it's just upside down, but it would work the same in the other direction if we just reversed the position of the door. Okay, so it opened, but it didn't close behind us. So let's go ahead and add that functionality. That's very easy to do. I'm going to come back over here and say, we have this like, well, what happens when this thing closes? I'm going to be lazy and select the cast to BP first person character, Control C, click, Control V, and there we go. So I've made a copy of it. I'm going to say, well, we're going to do that same check again. What left? Oh, what left was the third person or third or first person character over here. And then the easiest thing to do with a timeline is if we want the door just to shut behind us at the same rate, basically, all we need to do is come over here and say reverse. So we're just going to plug in the reverse. So it's just going to say play this backwards, basically. That's all we've got to do. And I think that's it. If we say compile and then first person, and I will play from here again. Click on and say play from here. So now if I come up to the door is going to open, and then when we leave, the door is going to shut behind us. So that's basically the action that we wanted it to do. Our collision box is working really well. But just for bonus content, I'm going to say like it's kind of weird that the door is silent in there. So we're going to actually add some sound to this door. What we're going to make sure that we do here is grab all of this and put this upstream of the timeline, because it's going to be updating every second and it's going to make the sound bizarre if we don't do that. So we're going to put it in right over here. I'm going to right click on here. I'm going to search for play sound, and I want play sound at location. Play sound 2D just means it plays in your speakers regardless of where you are, but we want this to play sound at location. It's not really going to make any difference in a first person player. It's going to sound the same, but in this case, if you had a multiplayer game and one of your players was farther away from you, or if the door is far away from you, we're just going to say play sound at location. All right, well, where is the location of this sound? We're just going to right click on here. We're going to say get actor location. There it is. What is the actor? It's this blueprint. Where is it? And we're just going to plug it into the location. So there we go. Now I have a sound already that I've added here, this door slide sound. I'm just going to select that. You can use a starter content sound or just drag in any wave file will work. I'm going to pop that in, and I want to take this and plug this pin in over here, and then I'm going to plug this in and over here. So we're going to say play that sound at location. I'm going to Control C to copy. I'm going to click and say Control V to paste so that it plays the same sound. You could play a different sound going in reverse, or play this sound backwards or whatever. I'm just going to play the same sound twice, and then I'm going to pull this guy down here and just use that same location. It's the same location, so I can plug it into 2 different spots. So this is all we need. I'm going to compile. go back to the first person game. I'm going to start over here, play from over here, and let me actually make the content drawer a little less huge. Play from here, and now if we walk up to the door, we get that sort of sound of the door sliding over, and then we walk over here, shuts behind us, so we get that same effect. We can do it again, same thing, because our collision box is on both sides. So now we've got a functioning like sliding door. So again, the more important thing about this isn't, oh look, now you know how to make a door. The more important thing is now you know how to trigger anything. You can play a sound effect in a specific spot. You can play a cutscene. There's all kinds of things that you can do with that trigger box. So let's do a door that has a little bit more functionality in the next video.